Hi class, let us now look at some very simple topics on multimedia ethics. We are not going to go into too much detail about the law or legal issues on multimedia because that will be topics for law classes, but we just want to have some idea about how to handle ethics in our production of multimedia as a producer, as an IT person, or as an engineer that want to produce multimedia content. Multimedia ethics, it is all about content. The appreciation and the business of multimedia is about the acceptance and the delivery of artistic content. This means most of the concern in multimedia ethics relates to the content. Mostly, it's about the content that we either should not publish as the content or the content that we should publish with proper procedure. Most of the content that we should not publish comes under these three categories: pornography, graphic, content that aiding to illegal activities. And for the graphic, it is spelled without S. These two spelling, with and without S, has very different meaning. Afterward, we explain it. But the first one is pornography. The definition of pornography is the explicit display of nudity, sex or sexual activities that is most likely offensive, unless the content is categorized as adult content. And the meaning of graphic without S is the explicit display of highly gruesome and scary images, and the spelling is without S because if it is with S, it means drawing. Like when you say computer graphics, the spelling is with S. The graphic here, gruesome and scary images, is spelled without S. And the content that's aiding to illegal activities are like the content on how to break into people's house, making bomb, etc. So these are the three content that we should not publish. But there are material that we can publish but require proper procedure. Most of this falls under the so-called copyrighted material. This will be discussed in the next section. Next section, the US Copyright Act 1976. For our course, we are not going to study the act like the law student do. Our focus would be on the significant differences that it brought in compared to the era before it. The first impact is ease of ownership. Ownership of what? Ownership of copyright. US Copyright Act 1976 has made it easy for the creator or the owner to own his copyright. Before this, the owner has to register his work to a registration office in order to legally own a copyright. As of this act, the owner doesn't have to do that anymore, as long as he has proved that he created the product. Then he owns the copyright. However, of course, it is highly recommended that the owner registers his work with a copyright registration office so that it will be easy for him to present the proper paperwork to prove his ownership if there is any dispute. One way to prove that a multimedia artwork is yours is by signing it. So signing is something legal. You have to be very serious with this. Signing is legal, so you need to use your legal name. Signing your artwork is also a simplest kind of way to seal a proof that you own it. This signing is also accepted by the Act as the simplest way of registration. Due to this reason, we made it compulsory for you to sign your artwork for this course. It is simple to sign. It just involves putting the word copyright or the symbol C in circle, followed by the year of production and the legal names of the owner. That is how we sign it. So just now, the Act made it easy for the owner of the copyright to own the copyright. But it's also make it easy for the other user to use that copyrighted material. Ease of use. The Act is also fair for both parties, the owner and the user. While the Act makes it easy for the owner to own copyright, it is also making it easy for the user to use copyrighted material. Prior to 1976, almost all copyrighted materials required written consent before being used. By this Act, the user is no longer bound to written consent if he is using a copyrighted material that can be found in public domain. The only honor that he has to give to the copyright owner is by acknowledging him. That is why in our class we also require you to acknowledge whatever source that you get to build your artwork, especially when it comes to video. You have to acknowledge it in your end credits. Then we mentioned about public domain over here. So what is public domain? Public domains are real or virtual resources where the users can access without providing valid identification or authentication. Example of such domains are the freely accessible web pages, pedestrian walks, where artworks are placed, magazines or newspaper that are available for free in public libraries, etc. A Facebook account where the user requires friendship in order to see something. These are not public domain, as the username and password are required. This means the use of artworks that are placed in such accounts, the Facebook accounts, require written consent. Any products or artwork that are presented in public domains can be used without written consent as long as acknowledgement is made. This, however, does not mean that the copyright owner has lost his ownership over the copyright. He still owns the copyright. If he wants others to use his work, only after he gives his written consent, then he should not put it in public domain. There's one way to do it. You can put, for example, for images, you can put in Shutterstock, for example. If someone wants to use your image that you put in Shutterstock, that person has to log in into Shutterstock. Then, if you require him to pay, then they have to pay. Otherwise, they can use it for free. But still, that is not public domain. And Shutterstock will take care of the written consent. Then, what is acknowledging? Acknowledgement means the user declares that the artwork that he is using is not his own by mentioning the original owner of the copyright. This can be done, for example, by giving the web page URL from where the user obtained the artwork. Then, this act also raised the issue of fair use and fair sharing. Sometimes you own some artwork, but owning the artwork does not mean that you own the copyright. You need to differentiate. Owning something and owning the copyright of that thing is two different things. The nature of using a copyrighted material that you own is also covered by US Copyright Act 1976. The use of the copyrighted material must be fair. This is what we call fair use. This means if your ownership doesn't include commercial use, then you cannot use it for business purposes. For this concept comes the idea that the use of copyrighted material for education or non-profit purposes is allowed to some limit. The Act also allows sharing of copyrighted material that you own up to certain level. This is what we call fair sharing. For example, if you buy a copyrighted DVD video, of course, the video is yours because you pay for it. And you are allowed to share it with your family. You can watch the video in the DVD with your family. But definitely, it's not allowed. You are not allowed to upload it to internet and share it with the whole world. For example, you cannot share it using torrent streaming. That will be a breach of Copyright Act. The boundary between fair and unfair share or use, however, is not very clearly defined by the Act. And if there is any dispute, we must always refer it to a court. Next, we go to a more in-depth description of explicit and graphic content. There are two terms that related to the first two categories of forbidden multimedia content, explicit and graphic. In multimedia context, explicit means the vividness, clearness, or the unfiltered display of sexual related content. This is related to pornography. Graphics, on the other hand, is the content that is vivid, also clear, and unfiltered, but instead of sexual related content, it is the display of scary, violent, gruesome, hideous, or grim content. It has nothing to do with the computer graphics processes like line drawing, circle painting, etc. So the spelling is without S. Explicit content is categorized as pornography and banned in many countries, while many allow it if it is classified as adult content. In Malaysia, pornography is banned 100%. However, there is a category of explicit content that is allowed in Malaysia called brief nudity. It is the explicit display of nakedness only for a very short time, perhaps maybe less than 2 seconds. It is allowed in Malaysia if the content is labeled as adult content 18xx and it is shown in a controlled environment like cinema or DVD. In cinema, the owner of the cinema is given the responsibility to control. If the movie is 18xx, they should not allow any children to come in. And for DVD, it is the responsibility of the parents to control their children from watching them. Graphic content, on the other hand, is allowed perhaps in all countries, in all media, but must be properly labeled with category. In Malaysia, the category is 18SG. The last topic, let us look at the very serious and hard to control content, the type of political, slanderous, and propaganda content. The type of multimedia content that is very hard to control, very hard to put into procedure, even very hard to categorize, but has very serious social and ethical impact is the content related to political and ideological views. Sometimes it also religious content. It is hard to categorize due to human nature that never abide to differences in ideas. For example, many parts of communism are offensive to democratic society, like the stripping of the freedom of speech, but the very idea of democracy that allows the right to choose a leader by majority vote is offensive in communism, as they consider it as a source of chaos. So far, there is no way of controlling this type of content, and there is no standard way of putting it into procedure, even though it is slanderous or untrue. In US, for example, putting something in the news, no matter how defamatory means slanderous or fitnah in Malay, is protected by law as freedom of speech, and no one can press any charges to the related party, the people that produce the slanderous news. This can be seen in the recent news made by Wall Street journals. This is not recent anymore. This incident took place before 2018. But let us use this as a reference. The incident where Wall Street journals put an untrue and unethical news about Malaysian administration. But no one in Malaysia or US can do anything about it. Of course, in Malaysia, because the often was done outside the Malaysian border, Malaysian law cannot do anything about it. But if you want to go to US and sue Wall Street Journal for the untrue news, you cannot do that also, because US protect it as freedom of speech. The only thing we can do about publishing this type of content is to be very careful and mindful of the local laws. That is all you need to know about multimedia ethics. Thank you for watching.